from extortion through labor racketeering to murder for hire. The tapes made from the Jaguar bug would now form a key part of the prosecution.
The conversations that were obtained as a result of that bug were enormously important because they chatted not just about payments that were being made, although they talked about that too, but they talked about the structure of organized crime. They talked about where their associates were and what particular jobs they had. What they did is describe in detail an organization, an enterprise.
Tony Corallo was in trouble, and his lawyer knew it.
It's one thing to overcome a witness testifying against you, but how can you overcome your own voice on a tape? Can you deny what you said?
The trial began in September 1986, and the defense immediately made a startling concession.
The bold move that was made, and it was made unanimously by all of the defendants, was the admission of the commission, admitting that the commission actually existed. Because it was almost foolhardy to deny it because the tapes established it.
To admit the existence of the commission was to admit the existence of the mafia. The defendants had effectively broken the code of omerta, or silence. A defense lawyer now put forward a novel line of argument, that the mafia was not a criminal organization.
In the opening statement, he admitted that there was such a thing as a mafia, but, so what? So what's wrong with that? And that was his defense. And you had to know that there wasn't going to get any better than that.
The defendants denied involvement in the Galante murder and claimed the concrete racket was a voluntary arrangement. But they were confronted with a mountain of evidence to the contrary, including testimony from mafia turncoats and police spies, surveillance footage, and, above all, hour after hour of secretly recorded conversations. Tony Corallo appeared resigned to his fate.
Corallo just sat stoically, like a man taking his punishment. And I think in many ways that was his attitude. I mean, he obviously, by speaking as openly as he did in the car, it was a major embarrassment. And I think he kind of viewed this as part of his punishment.
He said, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Just do the best job you can. He said, because this is just a question of time.
The trial lasted just 10 weeks. The verdicts were returned on November the 19th, 1986.
Guilty verdicts today in the federal trial of a group of mobsters accused of being the top bosses of organized crime in the United States.
We went through the first set of charges. Everybody was convicted of something. At that point, we knew that we had won. What wasn't clear until we got 15 or 20 minutes into the verdict, because there were a lot of charges, is that we had won everything, that every count was a conviction. At one point, one of the defendants was overheard saying to the lawyer, doesn't this, ever stop?
The government called Anthony Tony Ducks Corallo, Carmine Jr. Persico, and Anthony Fat Tony Salerno the board of directors of the Mafia. And today, after 6 days of deliberation, a New York jury agreed, finding them and 5 of their associates all guilty of running a racketeering and extortion enterprise.
I think it's going to take a long time to replace the kind of network that these men put together.
The judge now made full use of the RICO Act's ruthless sentencing provisions.
Judge Owen sentenced every one of them to 100 years in jail. I mean, he really sent a message to whoever wanted to become the next boss of those families that, this is what you're facing, 100 years in jail.
Punishment for publicity. It has nothing to do with the public good. and I think the penalty was absolutely excessive.
That was the thing that told the world, you don't have to be afraid of these guys anymore.
For over 50 years, the Mafia had prospered in New York and much of America. It had become woven into the fabric of American life. The Mafia had infiltrated legitimate economic activity and even acquired a certain glamour and mystique. But it would never be the same again.
I think it was one of the great turning points in the history of organized crime, because at that point everybody within the mob understood that everybody was vulnerable, including each of the bosses.
The leadership of the organization was demolished, sent to jail, all of its secrets were revealed, and much of the accumulated wisdom and experience of decades of criminal behavior was lost to the mob.
If anything makes organized crime organized, it's organization, the ability to communicate with one another. And when you demonstrate dramatically that communication is dangerous, it radically affects the ability of the mob to operate.
But there had been one curious omission from the charge sheet. The place it all started, the Long Island garbage industry, left out because prosecutors felt it would make the trial too unwieldy. Instead, Sal Avellino and his cronies were tried separately before a rather more lenient judge.
The judge decided to give Avellino community service, and then he allowed somebody else to serve that community service for Avellino. I thought it was an outrageous sentence.
It was a joke. It was such a farce.
But the fact the case had come to court had one disastrous consequence. Robert Kubecka's role as an informant was now public knowledge.
Robert became infuriated because his name was never supposed to be disclosed. And he felt like, you know, I put myself out on a limb for you guys, and my name's being disclosed now, and then you're slapping Avellino's hand.
The Mafia remained in control of the Long Island garbage racket, and their intimidation of the Kubeckas continued.
From 1986 until 1989, the threats continued, the damage to the business continued, the damage to the equipment continued, the threats to the customers continued. Nothing had changed.
Furious, far from backing off, Robert and Donald stepped up their collaboration with the authorities, cooperating with a number of investigations. It was a dangerous strategy. On August the 9th, 1989, Robert Kubecka received a series of phone calls.
There were 3. 2 were just kind of veiled threats, and the final was a threat to his life.
They informed the police. But when Donald went home to his wife that night, he appeared unconcerned.
Donald said, "No, Kathy, don't worry about it. We've made our phone calls and contacts to everybody as usual that we've done throughout the years, and they've told us there's no concerns, that we're okay, and I'm going to work in the morning." Much to my dismay, he went.
The 2 men were in the office as usual at dawn the next morning. Robert was shot 3 times and left for dead. Somehow he managed to call for an ambulance. But he died later that day. Donald had been killed immediately. Kathy was told only that there had been an incident involving her husband and her brother. She rushed to the office.
It was a police officer who approached me and actually took me into his car and let me know what happened and asked my opinion of who I thought it was. I said there was only one name I always heard about through the years that was a great threat to the family, and that was Avellino. I said it had to be him.
With Robert and Donald out of the way, the Mafia showed no mercy, muscling in on what was left of the family firm.
Once they died, the women in the family, we had to deal with trying to save the business, and then we had to watch the Mafia come in like vultures and just eat us alive business-wise. I mean, we practically had nothing to sell after a couple of months.
The Quebecers successfully sued the Organized Crime Task Force for failing to protect Robert and Donald. But the authorities did now finally begin an all-out assault on the power of the Mafia in Long Island. In 1993, Anthony Gaspipe Casso, Tony Corallo's successor as boss of the Lucchese family, was arrested. To reduce his sentence, Casso agreed to cooperate with the police and admitted the family's role in the Quebecers' killings. The guy was an informer, Casso said. There's only one way you deal with informers. You kill them. In 1994, Sal Avellino was sentenced to 10 years for helping plan the Quebecer murders. Today, Long Island's garbage companies are free of mob influence. More broadly, the Mafia is now a shadow of its former self. The commission trial that the Quebecers helped kickstart proved the first in a series of RICO-based investigations that would devastate the organization.
These guys are like a street gang now. They've been reduced to that.
More importantly, the insights gained during the commission and other inquiries helped destroy the glamour and mystique of the mob.
These were not geniuses. These were not people who were strategists. These were people who could hardly understand each other. They were incredibly unsophisticated and incredibly parochial.
But the story of the Quebecer family is a reminder of the power the mob once wielded, and of the cynicism, greed, and sordid brutality that was the reality of the Mafia.
What the Mafia has done to me is just tear apart my life. They're run by power, greed, and violence. They're bloodthirsty, power-hungry people. They're monsters. I lost both my husband and my brother to men. I mean, my brother was everything to me.